Hello and welcome to Toby's Blogs, and today we're going to go back in time to look at the Tudor monarchs. So, the Tudor monarchs, the Tudor period, is a really up and down kind of period where it's mostly religion. There's an up and down in religion. It goes Protestant, Catholic, back and forth, and this goes on for many years, way up past the Tudor period into the Stuart period. But we're going to look first at the first Tudor monarch, who was Henry VII. He became king in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth Field, where he was fighting Richard III, who you might know from a Shakespeare play with a hunch and said, "A horse, my kingdom for a horse," which is a load of codswallop. That didn't actually happen. Yeah, so he defeated Richard III on the Battle of Bosworth Field, and then once he'd done that, he claimed that he had the right of conquest and now is now king. He also put into practice that to secure him to be the king, he put things in place before the battle, so when he became king he could take over full power. He secured his throne mainly through manipulation of the nobles, trying to be above them and controlling them. During the Battle of Bosworth Field, once Henry VII got power and that he was now the king, anyone who fought on Richard's side was now a traitor, and so they were all charged with treason. So that's not a good way of getting rid of your opponents. Clever. Yeah, so Henry VII was quite a clever person. To unify the two sides, we had the Lancasters with their Red Rose and the Yorks. So it was fights against the Lancasters and the Yorks. And to unite the two, he married Elizabeth of York. So she was the White York, Henry VII was the Red Lancastrians, and to merge them together he married the woman from the other side, from the House of York. And that now, the two sides, he then merged them into one symbol, and that was the Tudor Rose. So anywhere you go to Tudor places and everything, you'll see the Tudor Rose. And that is the combination of the red rose for the Lancastrians and the white rose for the Yorks, the people who come from York, don't we call them. He was also a very tight miser. He loved his money and he kept it close. He held on to his money, and by the time that Henry VIII took over the throne, the monarchy was extremely wealthy. He was like a Scrooge, counting his money and kind of keeping it close. He had a lot of money by the time Henry VIII took over. But Henry VIII was not meant to be king. His brother Arthur was, because his brother Arthur was much more older than him, and so Arthur was meant to take the throne. But that never occurred because he died at the age of 15. So the person who's the heir to the throne would then get trained in how to be a king, how to rule, how to do things to be the king. So Arthur was given all this because he was the eldest son. So he tried to do this, but then he died. And then Henry VIII took over, and they had to try and train him quickly, which didn't really work. And Arthur was married to Catherine of Aragon, who you might have heard of. Well, hopefully you've heard of her. And Arthur died at age 15, so Henry VIII thought, well, I'll marry my brother's wife. And so he married Catherine of Aragon in 1509. But it says in the Bible somewhere that you should not marry your brother's wife. And so this caused a lot of problems, and this is where the whole Henry VIII trying to get rid of his wife thing spawned from. And so we go on to Henry VIII. Henry VIII loved sports. He was loved sports, loved war, very manly things, and he took over the throne quite unprepared, lots of money, lots and lots of money that his father had stashed away, and he just spent. And that's kind of Henry VIII, spending lavishly, doing all these things, going hunting, going sporting, being a very lavish person in his personality. And he wanted, and the one thing that Henry VIII wanted more than anything was to have a son. And he wanted a son more than anything. And this is where we get the 6 wives thing coming in. So Catherine of Aragon, not boring him a son, bore him a daughter, Mary I, strong Catholic, and well, everyone at the time was a Catholic. There wasn't any other religion. It was Catholicism, and that was it. So Catherine of Aragon, very strong Catholic, who gave birth to Mary I, who's also a very strong Catholic. And Henry VIII wanted a son. He needed a son to carry on his dynasty, and Catherine of Aragon wasn't giving him this, so he wanted to get rid of her. But Catherine of Aragon had ties with Spain and all these other places, and was a strong Catholic, and so the Pope liked her, and so this kind of annulment thing was not going to happen. The Pope would not allow them to be annulled, and he was not allowed a divorce, and so Henry VIII had to take it into his own hands. And this is where he went for this dissolution of the monasteries, where he sent a report out to all the monasteries to see if any of them were corrupt and all these other things. If they were corrupt, he shut them down. And so this is where the dissolution of the monasteries, the monks were chucked out, and Henry VIII got all the land, where he got the money and all these other things. And then he found a lovely little noble called Anne Boleyn. Now Anne Boleyn was quite clever and manipulated him and wouldn't give Henry VIII what he wanted, and so it only made him want him more. That's the thing, if you want something and the other person's not letting you have it, you want something you can't have. So Anne Boleyn kind of played him a little, played the games, pushed him further and further and further and further until he craved her and wanted her and would do anything to get his hands on her. So then Henry VIII declared himself the head of the Church of England, broke with Rome completely, and spawned a new religion, new section of Christianity, Protestantism. And this is where it's a turning point in history, where we get a split between Catholicism, which were the world was mostly all the Christians were Catholics. Now we've got a split now between Protestants and Catholics, and this is where for the next couple of 100 years or more, 200, 300 years, we get this split. And this is where the wars and all these people, thousands and thousands of people dying just because there's one event. And so they split. He declared himself head of the Church of England, gets rid of Catherine, goodbye Catherine, and marries Anne Boleyn. But Anne Boleyn isn't all that he... Once he gets her, he likes her and loves her and all that sorts of things, but then he finds out that she's not giving him a son either, and so he wants to get rid of her. And so he sends spies round to interrogate, and they find out that Anne Boleyn was having sex with her brother and all these other courtiers. She was having sex with these other people, and so she was tried for treason. Also, her last stillborn birth looked like an alien or something like that, and so they accused her of witchcraft. I don't believe most of these things actually happen. I think these were all just manipulated, and evidence was manipulated just to get her out of the way. And so Henry VIII had her beheaded, got a special swordsman from France to cut off her head really nice and quick. Yes, that's her. Then we get Jane Seymour, who then was a lovely innocent girl, kind of innocent and sweet, and Henry VIII loved her the most because she gave him a son, Edward VI. And he gave him a son. Fantastic, wonderful, brilliant. But then she died. So then that was a bit of disappointment, wasn't it? Yeah, she died and he loved her more than anything. And then his elite around him, his courtiers, his advisors, said to him that you need to marry again. And so you need to marry again, we need to have a political ally, we need some allies here, things are going wrong. And so we said, go to Anne of Cleves, and so with the Germans, and have an alliance there. And yes, I had an alliance with the Germans, sent away a portrait came back, he said, alright, she'll do, yeah, I like her, she's alright, I'll have her. Comes back, and when he actually meets her, he was like appalled by her and said she looked like a horse. She looks like a horse. And then so they got married, but it didn't last long, and they were soon divorced. And then she got a nice lovely house in Lewes, and other houses all over the place. So she got quite cushy off at the end of the day. Then he married another girl, I was thinking a Catholic, Catherine of Howard, who was a relation of one of the nobles. And she was young, very young indeed. And, well, she was like 15 or something, or less, don't know. And she married Henry VIII, but by this time he was fat and a bit grotesque, and she didn't really want him. And so, I don't know, a bit grotesque and horrible and stuff like that. And she went off with another courtier, Thomas Cooper, or whatever, I can't remember what his name was. And she had sex with him and had a vivid affair with him. And then they were caught one day, and that's it, she's gone. And then she was horrified when she saw her beloved lover head on a pike on her way to Tower of London. And she was just, I just think in history, like, what does she expect? What did she expect? But she was so young, she was so naive, and Henry VIII had a head calf. Such a pity, because she was so young, and she declared to her dying day that she loved this courtier. And that was the end of him. And by this time Henry VIII was really fat and ugly and bleh. And so he then took another wife, Catherine Parr, who nursed him through his final days until he died, a big fat blob. And that's it. Henry VIII, dissolution of the monasteries, created a whole new religion. Well, not a whole new religion, like a split in the religion of Christianity. He married 6 times, for all different reasons, and politics and all sorts of things. He loved sports, loved everything, and he loved eating, and he ended up quite fat. But he had a very good reign, lots of wars and other things. He loved war and stuff. So that was Henry VIII. So please tune in for the next video, where we'll be continuing our series on the Tudor monarchs, where we'll be looking at Edward and Mary, and possibly Elizabeth. Thank you for watching.